Hello and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget on this beautiful Friday afternoon. It is February 24th, obviously 2023. So we're basically through the month of February, already 2 months into 2023. This year is going by quick, just like the last couple of years have been, but still a lot of great topics in sports out there to talk about. Not a lot of action right now going on. Obviously, the NBA was on their All-Star break. NHL has a lot of action going on. I would love to talk more NHL. I just don't have the knowledge of hockey to really talk about that, to be kind of a trusted resource for that. I do talk about hockey when the Stanley Cup playoffs come around, but I just don't have the knowledge or just the overall fortitude for the NHL and hockey to talk about it more. I wish I did, and I am trying to get more knowledge on the sport so it can become more of a topic on the show as well. But with that being said, thank you for listening here and watching on the YouTube channel. Let's go ahead and look at today's topics. Now, like I said, not a lot of action going on in sports right now, so these topics are more talking points, and there's some of the major talking points in sports right now going on just in the sports landscape and obviously the American sports landscape. The first one is going to be, is load management killing the NBA? Now, this has been a big topic for weeks and months and basically years now. Is load management, stars sitting out, stars not playing back-to-backs, stars taking multiple nights off to rest for the playoffs and rest for a playoff run and other things like that? Is that killing the NBA? I'm going to kind of break down some of the stats that are kind of mind-blowing to me and just kind of I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was, but that'll be a major talking point, and that'll be topic one. Topic number two, we're going to head to college basketball, and we're going to talk about the situation in Alabama right now. And that's the situation with Brandon Miller. They also have another player, Jaden Bradley, that were potentially or allegedly involved in a shooting. Another teammate, Darius Miles, was supposedly the one who committed the murder of another Alabama student as well. So break that down about the Brandon Miller and Alabama situation and whether Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley should be playing right now. And that is kind of a bigger talking point right now. Should they be able to be on the court right now? And then my final topic, we're going to stay in college sports, but we're going to move to college football, and we're going to talk about the Pac-12 conference. The Pac-12 conference, obviously, with UCLA and USC leaving in a year, is the Pac-12 conference doomed, and are they dead? And is there no kind of return for this conference and no kind of pathway out for this conference moving forward? We'll talk about that, plus their TV media rights deal that they're trying to get right now. So that'll be a big talking point. That'll be my third and final topic. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into the show. And as I mentioned, my first topic of the day is load management killing the NBA? And that is just a simple question that a lot of people are asking right now. Is load management, is stars sitting out of games and not playing a full season, or resting for the playoffs, or resting because they don't want to play back-to-backs, or resting because they had a long stretch where they were trying to beat the all-time scoring record in LeBron's case, and then he took the next 3 games off? Is those things that are happening on a yearly basis and happening more frequently on a year-to-year basis in the NBA killing the NBA? Before we get into that topic of conversation, I wanted to read some stats here that kind of blew my mind when I found them. The first stat was, in the last 10 years, this actually goes all the way back to 2011, only 5% of players have played a season of 82 games. So since 2011, so it's basically 2011 to 2012, because this season hasn't concluded yet, so we don't have the full kind of statistics for this season. But in the last 11 seasons leading up to this season in the NBA, only 5% of players have played an 82 full game season. That is mind-blowing. 5% of players in that 10, 11-year span of only 5% of active players. I mean, the NBA, obviously, you have 30 teams. You have probably about 10 to 12 players on each roster. So you're looking at a lot of players, and obviously those rosters shift and change on a yearly basis. You have a 2-round draft every year that's bringing in another 65 potential, about 60. So it's another 60 players coming in from the draft, another ton of college kids and kids out of the G League signing 10-day contracts and signing unrestricted free agent contracts. So you have a crazy influx of players coming in every year. Obviously, the players that are on those teams and already in the league going year to year, and you're telling me that only 5% of those players in the last 11 years or last 11 seasons leading up to this season have played a full 82-game schedule, when guys like Michael Jordan, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, Guys like that in the past were playing 82 game schedules, a full 82 game season, and playing every 82 games on a yearly basis, like back to back, 3 years in a row, 4 years in a row. We're playing that on a yearly basis, and only 5% of the guys in the last 11 seasons can say that they've played one 82 game season. That was the first stat that kind of blew my mind. Another stat for me was only 5 players, so we'll stick with 5. Only 5 players last year in the 2021-2022 NBA season played a full 82 games. Only 5 players. That's less, obviously, that's less than 1%. That is astronomically low. Only 5 players last year played 82 games in the entire season. One of them, and only one of them was a really high contributing player. I think it was Mikal Bridges for the Phoenix Suns. But either way, both of those were just mind-blowing stats, and I actually have a little bit more on how to break this down as well. The average star, so read this online. This was actually off of NBA.com. This was an article on NBA.com, and it said the average NBA star, so what they're categorizing as a star is someone who has made an all-star game in the last 3 seasons. So that's what they're categorizing as a star, is that someone who made the all-star game in the last 3 seasons. And there's some money numbers, guys who are making over like 30 mil or over $25 million a year. But biggest kind of category for them to be a star was that they've made an all-star game in the last 3 seasons. So the average NBA star missed 28 games last season. 28 games. You're playing 82. You're missing more than a quarter of the season. You're missing more than a third of the season. 28 games. The average NBA star missed 28 games last season. And that's those, like I said, those 3 stats. I wanted to talk about those 3 stats before I got really into the topic of conversation, because those numbers are just mind-boggling. 5% of the league in the last 11 seasons can say that they've played one 82-game season. Only 5 players last year played all 82 games. The average NBA star missed 28 games last season. Those are just, like I said, 3 stats that I found online, credible sources as well, that are just mind-boggling to me, just totally mind-boggling to me, and really goes to show you why the NBA ratings have been on a steady decline for the last 5 years, outside of the bump that they got in 2020 due to, it was a little bit pre-COVID, and then obviously post-COVID. Obviously no one was at those games. There wasn't a lot of different sports on. Most people were locked in their house. So the NBA, with their bubble playoffs and kind of going into the 2020-2021 season, got kind of a boost, because what else are people going to do? What else are sports fans going to do? They're going to go ahead and watch the NBA, even if they're not an NBA fan, because there was nothing else to do, because we were locked in our homes and we couldn't do anything else. So that was the only real ratings bump that the NBA got. But since 2017, both the regular season numbers, playoff numbers, and finals numbers for the NBA are on a steady decline. An NBA Finals game last year between the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. The Boston Celtics are one of the most iconic teams in NBA history, and they're the most successful team in NBA history, along with the Lakers. And then you have the Golden State Warriors, the current dynasty in the NBA. Those 2 teams were playing in the NBA Finals last year, and their highest rated game in the finals last year is less than like a Thursday night football game for the NFL, or is less than a Sunday night football game, or less than a regular season NFL game, and some regular season college football games as well. The ratings for that finals were lower than they were the 2 previous years. And like I said, you have one of the most iconic brands in the entire sports, in all of American sports history, in the Boston Celtics. Probably the most iconic brand, or at least tied with the most iconic brand in NBA history, playing the current dynasty in the NBA in the Golden State Warriors, and they couldn't get good ratings for those games. So to me, it's a huge issue right now for the NBA, and you can look at a lot of different factors that are playing into this. I'm not going to get into the whole woke and political movement. People can talk about that on their own shows. That's not what I get into here. I don't talk about that. But you can talk about the culture of this generation's culture, and how it kind of breeds into sports and breeds into the NBA even more. And that's a big part of it as well. because when you watch a lot of older, more seasoned NBA fans or NBA analysts talk about the game, they talk about how the game isn't nearly as physical as it used to be. Players have more access and better access to healthcare, trainers, everything that you need to have a healthy body. Players have more access to it now than they ever have been. So with those two contributing factors, how is it that players are missing more games when they have when they have those contributing factors and more access to healthcare, to trainers, things like that? You have more access to a lot of different things that players in the 80s, especially the 70s, 90s, even the early 2000s didn't have access to. So why are players still missing games at an unbelievably high level? Average star is missing 28 games last year, which is just unbelievable. I think it's a lot due to culture. This culture just doesn't seem to enjoy or love the game as much as past players did. Now, that's not every player in the league. That's not every player on, any team you want to mention. But the majority of players, it just seems like that they don't have the love for the game as some of their past generations have had. And obviously, with just the contracts, I don't know where the NBA is getting this kind of money, because they're losing money right now, it seems like, with the amount of contracts and what these guys are getting paid. You have guys who are, the third or fourth best player on a team making $25+ million. Yeah, if you're paying me $25+ million and I'm an average player in the NBA, sure, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, because you're basically incentivizing me to do whatever the hell I want, because you're paying me more money than 1% of the entire American population makes on a yearly basis. You're paying me better than the 1%ers in this country, and I'm only average at my job. Of course I don't need to show up every night. You're incentivizing that. You're incentivizing guys like Kyrie Irving to sit out an entire year, basically, or to show up when he wants to. But you know what? He's making $40+ million. So the money that is being paid to this player is contributed to this problem for the NBA. The culture has contributed to that as well. Everybody just wants to play for the playoffs. The regular season means nothing anymore. And then when you get to the playoffs, the ratings are still down because of the terrible regular season you had. And let's not even get started with the All-Star game. That game the other night, I didn't even try to watch it, but the parts I did watch, or the highlights I did watch, you literally have guys standing around or with their arms crossed like this, just standing around. It's basically a one-on-one show. It's basically kind of a dunk contest, alley-oop contest. The lowest rated All-Star game in NBA history, and just a terrible depiction of the game of basketball. So that was awful the other night as well, on Sunday night, the All-Star game. But the bigger question is, can the NBA fix this? And there is a couple of things you can do to fix this. Maybe you need to look into shortening the season. Maybe we go to like a 66 game schedule, start the season on Christmas Day, which is the biggest day of the year for the NBA, even though the NFL has kind of penetrated that day as well. But maybe start the season on Christmas Day, shorten the season, bring it down about 20 games, have less back-to-backs, especially on the road, because heaven forbid stars play 2 games on the road, because it just doesn't happen. And that could go a long way as well, is doing that. But another question that people have been asking is, is Adam Silver and the league office going to start mandating that players, and star players especially, play in these games, play more games? Now, obviously, if you have a legit injury, that's not a case, that's not a conversation. You don't need to play. But if you just want to rest because you just played last night, or you want to rest up because you maybe played a 2 overtime game a couple nights before, that can no longer be the case. Does the league and Adam Silver step in and start mandating that those players play through that? I don't know. That could be very difficult for the team to do, for the league to do. And then obviously when they bring that up to the basketball player, or to the NBA Players Association, that's going to be very hard to kind of pass through as well. But the last question I have for this topic is, do NBA star players have an obligation to play in games, and an obligation to the fans? And my answer to that is yes. Because when you're Chicago, or you're in New York, or you're in Milwaukee, or you're in, Minnesota, and the Lakers are in town, or the Warriors are in town, or the Bucks are in town, and you want to see LeBron, or you want to see Steph, or you want to see Giannis, or Dallas is in town, and you want to see Luka, and they're resting because they had a game the night before, or they kind of scuffed themselves a little bit, or just got just a little bit banged up and want to sit out a night to rest, or the playoffs are around the corner, they want to rest themselves and be ready for the playoffs. Are those players obligated to play for the fans that have spent their hard-earned money to show up to those games, to watch those games, to see those star players? I believe they do have an obligation, because at the end of the day, this is your profession, this is your career, this is your job, and if you're not injured enough or you can't play, you should definitely give it the best shot that you can to get out on the court and play, even if it's only for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever that may be, because I do believe that these star players especially have an obligation to the fans that are supporting them, that are kind of paying their paychecks by showing up to the games and paying for ticket prices. Obviously, there's a lot more that go into paychecks, but ticket sales do go a long way. I do believe these star players have an obligation to the NBA fans, especially on the road, when these fans only have maybe once or twice have a chance to see maybe their favorite player or a star player play in their arena and play in their hometown. So obviously that's a topic that's been hotly debated on basically any sports network out there. It'll be continued to be debated until this situation is either rectified or it just becomes normalcy, or just kind of normal for this to be the case going forward. I hope that the latter, that they're becoming normal, does not become true, but as the weeks and the months and the years go by, it seems that is the case. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and move to my second topic of the show, and that is going to move to college basketball, and we're going to talk about the Alabama and Brandon Miller situation. So just to kind of recap this whole situation here. So Brandon Miller is allegedly, he hasn't been charged, but he is allegedly to be involved with the Darius Miles shooting in January, I believe it was January 15th, obviously 2023, of a fellow Alabama student, which resulted in the murder of that Alabama student. I don't remember her name right now, but what ended up in the murder. And Brandon Miller allegedly provided the gun that was used in the murder of that Alabama student. Also, Jaden Bradley, another Alabama basketball player, was alleged to be at the scene of the shooting during the shooting. So a huge kind of mess there. Obviously, number one, Darius Miles. So all three of these players, Darius Miles, Brandon Miller, and Jaden Bradley, are all three players for Alabama. Alabama did one good thing so far, and they cut Darius Miles, who has been charged and has been arrested and charged with the murder of the Alabama student. Number two, we have Brandon Miller, who is the star player for Alabama right now. He has been allegedly the person that provided the gun to Darius Miles to carry out that murder. And then we have Jaden Bradley, another player for the Alabama Crimson Tide basketball team, who was supposedly at the scene of the shooting during the shooting as well. So a lot to unpack here. I don't love what Miller and his attorney, their reasoning for the whole situation. Brandon Miller and his attorney basically are saying right now that Miller had no idea that illegal activity would occur with the gun when he delivered it. No idea. You're still delivering a gun as, a young adult. You're still delivering a gun to another player, friend, or whatever, and he said he had no idea of any illegal activity would occur with that gun. Don't think that's your best defense, but that could be his only defense right now. But let's get to the bigger issue. So we're going to recap just a little bit about Alabama right now, just to kind of give it a little bit more context on why this is such a big story. Obviously, Alabama, it's more of a football school, but they have a really good basketball team this year. They're the number 2 ranked team in the country right now at 23-4. They're the number 1 team in the SEC, 14-1 in the conference. And then when it gets even deeper, you look at Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller is their star forward. He is averaging 19 points per game and 8 rebounds per game, shooting 46 from 2 and 43 from the three-point range from beyond the arc. So he is a really good player. Right now, he is actually projected to be a lottery pick. So he is projected right now to be a lottery pick, and a lot of people have him currently in the top 5 of their mock drafts. So if you look at people's mock drafts, whether it be Sham Serena or whoever it may be, NBA.com, Jay Billis, whoever has their mock drafts out there, Brandon Miller is currently hovering around, top 5, top 7 kind of pick. So he is that good of a player. And actually, Jaden Bradley, the other student athlete that was allegedly at the scene of the crime during the crime, is leading the team in assists. All of those stats and all of the stats for Alabama's basketball team, when it comes to this kind of situation and this kind of conversation, are irrelevant. The only thing that is relevant in this conversation is the life that student at Alabama, the girl that lost her life, the student from Alabama that lost her life, that is the only thing that is relevant in this conversation. I wanted to bring up some of those other things to kind of give it more context, but also to tell you that none of those things are relevant. And the bigger question for me and for a lot of people right now is, should Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley be able to, or should they still be playing for the University of Alabama? And in my opinion, they shouldn't. Not until there's been a thorough investigation and both of them have been cleared by law enforcement, which there is some speculation they haven't been charged yet, but they haven't been cleared yet either. It's still an open investigation that both of them were not involved in this shooting at all, that Bradley wasn't there at the scene of the crime, and that Miller didn't knowingly provide that gun to Darius Miles to shoot that student athlete. So until both of those things have been resolved, I would not have Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley on the court for my team if I was Nate Oates, the head coach of the Alabama basketball team. I understand that Brandon Miller is your best player and that you have a chance to win not just an SEC championship in basketball, but win the entire NCAA tournament championship for basketball as well. That shouldn't matter. Someone lost their life as a result of this situation. That is the only thing that matters. And so this is a situation that's going to be ongoing. Brandon Miller and Jaden Bradley, according to Nate Oates and the Alabama athletic department and the AD at Alabama, as of now, they are going to be playing. They are going to be on the court. They are going to be active for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't know if it's basically until one of them are charged or until there's more, just more evidence showing that they were more involved than it has been so far. But either way, this is a total mess for Alabama. This is a total mess for college basketball, which doesn't need this kind of publicity right now, because if you want to talk about the NBA ratings being down, college basketball regular season ratings have plummeted for years now outside of the NCAA tournament. So this is a story that is not going to go away, and Alabama needs to resolve this and get out. Well, they can't get out in front of it. It's already past them, but they need to resolve this, and I really do think they need to sit those two players down until both of those players are fully cleared of any kind of involvement in this murder case. And then let's go to a different note here, and we're going to transition to my third and final topic, and we're going to talk about, we're going to stay in college sports. We're going to move over to college football. It's college sports a little bit more, because obviously we're going to talk about the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 is more than just football, but football and college football is the driving engine for the Pac-12 or any major Power 5 conference in college sports. So my third and final topic is the question, is the Pac-12 dead, and are they doomed? Is it dead? And let's go ahead and talk about that. Obviously, most people already know. I don't know if you don't know this news, then I don't know where you've been for the last, 8 months or whatever. But obviously, the Pac-12 is losing the big brands in USC and UCLA to the Big Ten in 2024. And not just that, not just the fact that they're losing UCLA and USC, probably the two biggest brands. USC is definitely the biggest football brand. UCLA is definitely the biggest basketball brand. And just as a whole, they're the biggest brands in the Pac-12, maybe outside of Oregon football. But either way, not just losing those brands, but you're losing the LA market, and that is a huge blow to the Pac-12. So obviously we've known about this news. We know that it was coming. But right now what the Pac-12 is trying to do is they're trying to negotiate their next media rights deal. Like who is going to be showing Pac-12 games in the fall for football, obviously in the fall and winter and spring for basketball. Who is going to be showing those games for their two biggest sports, and what is the outlet is going to be carrying those games and showing those and the shows that go around them as well. And currently right now who the Pac-12 is in negotiations with and who they're basically down to is Apple TV. Is Apple TV Plus. So that's not Fox, that's not CBS, that's not ABC, that's not NBC. No, they're down to Apple TV. When you look at the Big Ten where USC and UCLA are going, the Big Ten has a media rights deal with CBS, Fox, and NBC. Fox being the biggest contributor, but CBS and NBC also having rights to Big Ten games, both in especially in football, but also in basketball as well. So they have media TV rights deal with 3 of the biggest networks in the country, and the Pac-12 can't even get at the table with any of those networks and is resorting to going to Apple TV Plus, which is just, it's something that, yes, Apple has a lot of money, but doesn't mean they're going to dole out a bunch of money to have the Pac-12 games, have Pac-12 football games and Pac-12 basketball games on their network. And another question is, so obviously Apple TV Plus is a streaming service. And the question is the Pac-12 without USC and UCLA, especially in football, big enough or popular enough to live on a streaming service? So how often are people going to watch the Pac-12 games, especially football, because this is more of a football topic, because that drives basically all the media rights deals for any of the Power 5 conferences. Are they popular enough for someone to not find them on ABC or Fox or CBS or ESPN or whatever, but no, having to either download or maybe they already have Apple TV Plus, but go to that streaming service and then search for those games there? Are they popular enough for that? In my opinion, and the numbers show, they are not. Because if you look at the top 5 rated games last year for the Pac-12, and this is not counting any games that USC and UCLA were involved in, because obviously they won't be a part of this conference when this media rights deal does drop in 2024, supposedly. The top 5 games was, number 1 was Washington versus Oregon, had 3.6 million viewers on average. Then we had Oregon State versus Stanford, 3.5 million viewers on average. Cal versus Stanford at 2.74 million viewers on average. Stanford versus Oregon at 2.6 million viewers on average. And then to round out the top 5, we had Oregon versus Utah at 2.5 million viewers on average. If you just compare that to games that USC or UCLA were involved in, USC's game versus Notre Dame that was on ABC, that was their primetime game, had 6.6 million viewers. USC versus UCLA that was on Fox's primetime game had 4.5 million viewers, and USC versus Utah, the Friday night Pac-12 championship game, had 6.2 million viewers. All 2 of those games had 3 more viewers than the most of the highest. 3 million more viewers than the highest of any other Pac-12 game not involving one of those 2 teams. And by contrast, it doesn't even really compare outside maybe the USC-UCLA game. But if you really want to compare it to the biggest game in college football last year, that was Michigan versus Ohio State, which was a noon game on the East Coast, 9 a.m. on the West Coast. 17 million viewers on average for that game. Now, obviously, that game is an aberration. That game has about 8 million more viewers than any other college football game had last year. But still, the biggest games in the Pac-12, the most viewed games in the Pac-12 last year either had USC or UCLA or both of them involved. And obviously, those 2 teams aren't going to be there in 2024. And that's going to be a huge blow. And those numbers just go to show that the Pac-12 is probably not going to be able to exist and be popular enough on a streaming service like Apple TV Plus. Doesn't matter if it was Apple TV Plus, Amazon Prime, doesn't matter what streaming service it would be. It is not enough. They don't have enough popularity to generate enough more popularity when people actually have to search for those games outside of just being on their regular TV network or coming on after their favorite game. because a lot of people on the East Coast and then the Midwest end up watching Pac-12 games because it comes on after the Big Ten game, or it comes on after the SEC game, or they're looking for a game to watch at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, and the only games that are on or still on at that time in the East Coast and in the Midwest are the Pac-12 games. But if they're going to have to search for them on Apple TV Plus on a streaming device, that's going to hurt the Pac-12 even more. And those ratings are going to go from, their highest being 3.63 million viewers to maybe like 2.5 to 1.5 million viewers. And that could sink the Pac-12 because they definitely need that kind of viewership to grow as a conference, especially in football where they've been down for the last, 8, 9 years. But even if you break it down even more. So right now, Dennis Dodd of 24/7 Sports and CBS actually reported that the average profit on a yearly basis from this TV media rights deal with the Pac-12 would pay each university about $25 million per year per school. So $25 million per year per school annually for the universities that'll be in the Pac-12 in 2024. By contrast, that's almost $50 million behind what the Big Ten is. So schools like Indiana, Illinois, Northwestern are going to be making maybe $50 million in football, or their football and their university and their athletic programs are going to be making $50 million more than Oregon or Washington, who are teams that could compete for a national championship this year and have really good trajectory going for the last couple of years, especially Oregon more than Washington. But they're going to be making more off of their football program than Oregon or Washington. Like I said, schools like Indiana or Illinois or Northwestern, traditionally not good football schools, are going to be making a lot more. It's something that's astronomical to me, and it's something that's really going to be killing the Pac-12. And then if you talk about just basketball, right now basketball, there's only 3 teams in most bracket breakdowns that are from the Pac-12 that are going to be making the NCAA tournament this year, and 2 of those 3 teams are USC and UCLA. So right now, if USC and UCLA were in the Big Ten today, the only team that would be making the NCAA tournament, projectingly right now, and pretty much probably would be the case from the Pac-12 would be Arizona. So outside of college football, the biggest, and even above college football, the biggest amateur or collegiate sports event of the entire year, the NCAA tournament, if you don't count USC and UCLA, would have one team from the Pac-12 conference going forward, and that would be Arizona. So it is really a dire situation right now for the Pac-12. And a bigger question is, will the Big Ten come and steal more schools? Is Oregon and Washington out on the way to the Big Ten? And maybe the Big 12 will jump in. I really think the Big 12 will look at the Arizona schools, Arizona State and Arizona, and we'll look at Utah as well. Since they have BYU, you can bring Utah over the Big 12 and bring back that rivalry between Utah and BYU, which is a very big rivalry in college sports, especially in college football. But things look really dire, like I said, for the Pac-12 conference. I think when we're watching football in either 2025 or 2026, watching college football, watching college basketball, I wouldn't be shocked if the Pac-12 ceased to exist by the time we're watching these sports in 2025, 2026. But they have to scramble and figure something out, or that will become true, and that conference will dissolve. With all that being said, thank you for watching my show. Obviously, this is Sports Talk on a Budget. If you prefer the audio version, it is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or basically wherever you get your podcast. Or if you prefer the video version, this is also available on YouTube under Sports Talk on a Budget. And you can follow me on my social media pages under Sports Talk on a Budget. That is going to be on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Thank you again for watching and listening, and have a great day.